First contact incident. The Universal Diplomatic Assembly was in uproar. Representatives from over 14,000 species crowded the massive chamber, their environmental pods drifting in concentric rings around the central speaking platform. High Counselor Ziktar, a towering insectoid whose carapace shimmered with bioluminescent patterns signaling distress, raised all 6 of his upper limbs for silence. Order. The assembly will have order. His voice, translated through the universal system, echoed across the chamber. Gradually, the cacophony of complaints, threats, and fearful exclamations subsided. The diplomatic pods, each containing atmospheres ranging from methane-ammonia mixes to superheated plasmas, drifted back into their assigned positions. The incident in the Proxima Centauri system requires our immediate attention, Ziktar continued. Before we deliberate on a response, Ambassador K'leth will present the factual report. A gelatinous being, housed in a water-filled containment unit, floated forward. K'leth's tentacles swirled in complex patterns as they connected with the assembly's neural interface. 17 cycles ago, the Draxian Confederacy dispatched a reconnaissance fleet of 3 vessels to the Sol system. K'leth began. Their mission was standard: assess the technological capabilities of the newly discovered species that calls itself human and determine their potential for galactic integration. The central holodisplay activated, showing 3 sleek, organic-looking vessels approaching a blue-green planet. The Draxians followed standard first contact protocol. K'leth continued. They disabled a minor orbital defense platform to demonstrate their technological superiority, then broadcast the standard greeting and submission request in all known mathematical formats. The holodisplay shifted to show a small satellite erupting in a shower of debris. The humans responded, unexpectedly. The image changed again. Now it showed a fleet of crude, blocky vessels, dozens, then hundreds of them, emerging from the planet and its nearby moon base. The humans launched what appears to be their entire military space capability. Not just nearby forces, everything they had. Units stationed across their entire solar system abandoned their posts to converge on the Draxian vessels. The assembly watched in stunned silence as the human vessels surrounded the 3 Draxian ships. The Draxians, realizing their miscalculation, attempted to withdraw and apologize for the cultural misunderstanding. They powered down weapons as a sign of peaceful intent. The hologram showed the Draxian ships changing configuration, their organic hulls morphing to display universal symbols of non-aggression. The humans ignored all attempts at communication and opened fire. What followed made several diplomats disconnect from the neural feed in distress. The human vessels didn't merely disable the Draxian ships, they reduced them to subatomic particles. Weapon after weapon struck the alien vessels long after they had ceased to be functional. When nothing remained of the Draxian ships, the humans collected every fragment larger than 1 micrometer. They then deployed nuclear devices at the location of the engagement, apparently to sterilize any remaining trace of the Draxian presence. K'leth's tentacles drooped in what the translation interface identified as profound concern. The most troubling aspect was discovered when our linguistic experts analyzed the human communications during and after the incident. The holodisplay shifted to show data streams and translation matrices. The humans never considered this an act of defense. They classified it as a measured response. Their military officials described the action as restrained and proportionate. Some human leaders even criticized their military for not being thorough enough. Gasps and murmurs erupted across the chamber. "Quiet," commanded Ziktar. "Let the ambassador finish." K'leth's form pulsed anxiously. Our xenopsychologists have been analyzing human behavior and linguistic patterns since we first detected their electromagnetic emissions. They've reached a disturbing conclusion. Humans fundamentally lack the concept of proportionality, as understood by all other known sentient species. The holodisplay showed a complex neural mapping network. All previously encountered species develop proportional response concepts as they evolve toward sentience. Without it, a species typically destroys itself before achieving interstellar capability. But humans appear to be an exception. An analyst named Vrilgix, a crystalline entity from a silicon-based civilization, drifted forward. We've studied human history extensively. When attacked, they don't merely repel, they annihilate. Their conflicts follow a pattern. Initial restraint, followed by escalation to total war if the initial response doesn't eliminate the threat. The display showed scenes from human history, ancient armies salting the earth of conquered cities, nuclear weapons detonating over population centers, orbital bombardments of rebellious colonies. Their entertainment media glorifies this tendency. Vrilgix continued. They tell stories where heroes destroy entire buildings to neutralize a single threat. Their most popular narratives feature protagonists who suffer tremendous damage before unleashing overwhelming retaliation that leaves nothing of their opponents. The representative from the Harmonious Collective, a hive mind of gas-based organisms, pulsed in confusion. But how did such a species survive its own development? Why didn't they destroy themselves? Kileth's tentacles formed a pattern indicating qualified uncertainty. That remains unclear. They've come remarkably close to self-destruction multiple times, but always pull back from the brink. Yet they show no such restraint toward external threats. The Security Counselor, a massive being composed of interlocking metallic plates, ground out a comment that the translators struggle to convey. It appears they save their worst tendencies for those outside their species. Precisely, confirmed Kileth. And now they've detected our observation posts. Our analysts project they will interpret our monitoring as hostile intelligence gathering, which, to be fair, it is, and respond accordingly. Ziktar's bioluminescence pulsed with alarm. What is your recommendation, Ambassador? Kileth's form rippled nervously. The diplomatic corps has two proposals. First, immediate cessation of all observation activities within 5 light years of the Sol system. Second, establishment of a quarantine zone around human space. No contact, no trade, no communication. Isolation, exclaimed the representative from the Merchant Collective, their avian features bristling. Their system contains valuable resource deposits and rare elements. Would you prefer extinction? Countered Kileth. Because that is what we risk if humans perceive the galactic community as a threat. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. There is one more thing, added Vrilgix, the crystalline analyst. Our deep probe scans indicate the humans are discovering something that will change everything. What? Demanded Ziktar. They're on the verge of developing true faster-than-light travel, not using the established jump gates or wormhole networks, something entirely new, something that would make quarantine impossible. The assembly erupted into chaos once more, but this time Ziktar didn't call for order. The High Counselor simply stared at the holographic display, where a small blue planet rotated peacefully against the black of space, a planet whose inhabitants apparently didn't understand that when you eliminate a threat, you're supposed to stop once it's eliminated. They don't even have a concept for enough, whispered Ziktar to itself, unheard amid the growing panic. May the cosmic order help us all. The human solution. 6 galactic standard cycles had passed since the Proxima Centauri incident. The quarantine of human space had held. Barely. High Counselor Ziktar's bioluminescent patterns were permanently dimmed now, the result of chronic stress as reports of human activity near the quarantine border grew more frequent. The Emergency Council meeting had been in session for 19 straight hours. Representatives had cycled through as their biological functions required rest, but Ziktar had remained, sustained by stimulants and nutrient infusions. The humans have established 17 outposts beyond their solar system, reported Admiral Jakar of the Boundary Enforcement Fleet. The militaristic mollusk's shell glowed with tactical readouts. They're mapping the jump gate network, though they still can't access it. Have they detected our monitoring stations? Asked Ziktar. Impossible to say, replied Jakar. They shouldn't have the capability, but But they keep doing things they shouldn't be capable of, finished Ziktar bitterly. The council chamber doors parted, admitting a breathless diplomatic aide. The small avian creature fluttered directly to Ziktar, bypassing normal protocol entirely, a shocking breach of etiquette that immediately silenced the chamber. "High Counselor," squawked the aide, "we're receiving a transmission from the humans." The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter. Ziktar raised all 6 arms. Silence. Once order was restored, Ziktar asked, "How are they transmitting?" "The quarantine blocks all standard communication channels." "They're not using standard channels," the aide replied nervously. They've somehow accessed the assembly's emergency quantum entanglement network." Stunned silence fell over the chamber. The quantum network was the most secure communication system in the galaxy, reserved for existential threats to galactic civilization. "That's impossible," whispered J. "The technology required." "Do you want to tell the humans it's impossible?" snapped Ziktar. "Or shall we see what they want?" Without waiting for an answer, Ziktar gestured to the central holodisplay. "Open the channel." The holographic projector flickered, then displayed a human figure. The being appeared deceptively similar to several other bipedal species, though its lack of obvious defensive adaptations was striking. It wore a formal uniform of some kind, predominantly blue with geometric gold symbols on the shoulders. "This is Captain Eleanor Chen of the United Earth Alliance," the human said, its voice translated smoothly by the assembly systems. "I'm authorized to speak on behalf of humanity in this first official contact between our civilizations." Ziktar's bioluminescence flashed in surprise. "You're aware of us." The human's facial features arranged themselves in what the cultural database identified as a smile, a gesture that could indicate either friendliness or aggression depending on context. "We've been aware of the galactic community for some time, High Counselor Ziktar. Your observation techniques are less subtle than you might think." Ziktar's patterns shifted to indicate formal diplomacy. "I am curious why you've chosen to contact us now, after the unfortunate incident with the Draxian vessels." "That's precisely why I'm contacting you," replied Captain Chen. "We've intercepted enough of your communications to understand there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" J.Care interjected incredulously. "You obliterated 3 ships that posed no threat to your civilization." The human's expression shifted to what the database labeled grim determination. "With respect, Admiral J.Care, those ships destroyed a civilian research platform with 27 scientists aboard. They then positioned themselves to deploy weapons capable of sterilizing our planet's surface." "That's absurd," exclaimed J.Care. "The Draxians were following standard first contact protocol." "Your standard protocol involves destroying civilian installations and threatening planetary destruction." Captain Chen's voice remained level, but the translation system detected elevated stress patterns. "If so, I suggest you review your protocols." Ziktar's mind raced. There must be some mistake. The Draxians would never. "We've decrypted their tactical logs," interrupted Chen. "We know exactly what they intended. But that's not why I've contacted you today." The human manipulated something off-screen, and the holodisplay split to show a star map of a region near the galactic core. "We've detected something concerning in this sector," continued Chen. "A pattern of star deaths that doesn't match any natural phenomenon." Admiral J.Care scoffed. "And how would humans know about star patterns in the galactic core? You've barely left your own system." Chen's expression didn't change. "We've developed our own method of faster-than-light observation. The details aren't important right now. What matters is what we found." The star map zoomed in, showing a cluster of stars, or rather, where stars should have been. Instead, there was nothing but darkness, spreading outward in a suspiciously regular pattern. "The Void Plague," whispered an archivist from the back of the chamber, its ancient voice trembling. "It's not a myth." Ziktar felt its limbs go numb. The Void Plague was an ancient legend, a cautionary tale told to initiates of the deeper mysteries, a sentient darkness that consumed stars, growing stronger with each extinction. You know of this phenomenon? Asked Chen, suddenly intent. It is a legend, Ziktar admitted. A story from the early days of our galactic history, before the assembly was formed. It's no legend, Chen replied flatly. It's consuming stars at an accelerating rate. By our calculations, it will reach populated systems within 3 galactic standard cycles. The chamber descended into panicked discussion. Ziktar once again called for order. Even if this threat is real, the High Counselor said once quiet had been restored. Why come to us? You must know the Assembly views humanity with concern. Captain Chen's expression softened slightly. Because you need us. And if this thing reaches Earth, we'll need you too. Need humans. Shker barked a laugh. Why would the galactic community need a species that responds to every threat with absolute annihilation? For the first time, the human smiled without reservation, and the expression sent a shiver through Ziktar's exoskeleton. Because, Admiral, Chen said quietly, that's exactly what this situation calls for. Your record shows 17 previous attempts to contain the void plague, all using carefully calibrated, proportionate responses designed to minimize collateral damage to surrounding spacetime. How could you possibly know that? Demanded Ziktar. Those records are sealed. Chen ignored the question. All 17 attempts failed because they were proportionate. This entity feeds on stars. It's already beyond reasonable responses. You need a species that doesn't understand the concept of overkill. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Ziktar finally. A joint operation, replied Chen. You provide the knowledge of previous encounters and access to the jump gate network. We provide the solution. And what solution is that? The star map zoomed out, showing the projected path of the void plague. Chen manipulated the controls again, and a new element appeared on the map. A massive device of some kind, positioned directly in the entity's path. We call it the Nova Lance, said Chen. It creates a contained supernova explosion, focused into a directed energy weapon. Jiker's tactical displays flashed with alarm. That would tear a hole in spacetime itself. The collateral damage to surrounding systems would be extensive, Chen acknowledged calmly, but survivable, unlike the alternative. Ziktar studied the human carefully. You developed this weapon just for this threat. Chen hesitated before answering. No, we developed it after the Draxian incident, when we realized the galaxy contained threats we couldn't defeat with conventional means. But we never deployed it because we recognized its terrible potential. Yet now you're willing to use it, observed Ziktar. Against an entity consuming entire stars. Yes, Chen said without hesitation. Sometimes the only appropriate response to an existential threat is overwhelming force. The council chamber remained silent for long moments as the assembled representatives contemplated the human proposal. Finally, Ziktar spoke. The assembly will need to discuss this matter in private, Captain Chen. Please stand by. The transmission was temporarily muted, and Ziktar turned to face the gathered representatives. This changes everything, murmured the archivist, its ancient voice quavering. If the humans are right about the void plague. Can we trust them? Demanded J-Care. This could be an elaborate ploy to gain access to the jump gate network. Kaleth's gelatinous form pulsed anxiously. Our own long-range sensors have detected anomalies in that region, though we hadn't identified their cause. The human data appears to corroborate our findings. Ziktar's bioluminescent patterns shifted through colors of deep contemplation. Consider our position. If the humans wanted to attack us, they wouldn't need this pretense. They've already demonstrated they can breach our most secure communication networks. And if they're lying about the Draxian intentions, pressed J-Care. Vrilgix, the crystalline analyst, rotated slowly in its containment field. I've analyzed the transmission data embedded in Captain Chen's communication. It contains what appears to be the decrypted Draxian tactical logs. They do indicate plans for a planetary sterilization demonstration if the humans fail to immediately submit. Shocked murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Draxians wouldn't, began J-Care, but his voice trailed off. The Draxian Confederacy had always been aggressive in its expansion policies, but this level of first-contact intimidation violated all assembly protocols. It seems, said Ziktar slowly, that we have misunderstood both the humans and the situation. The High Counselor's limbs moved in a pattern signifying reluctant acceptance. Reopen the channel. Captain Chen's image reappeared in the holodisplay. The Assembly has reached a preliminary decision, announced Ziktar. We will dispatch a scientific delegation to verify your findings regarding the Void Plague. If corroborated, we will consider your proposal for a joint operation. Chen nodded. Thank you, High Counselor. Time is critical, but we understand your need for verification. We'll transmit coordinates for a neutral meeting point where your delegation can review our complete data. There is another matter, Ziktar added. The incident with the Draxian vessels. If what you say is true, then the Assembly owes humanity an apology. The human's expression registered surprise before returning to professional neutrality. We understand the misunderstanding, High Counselor. Cultural differences can lead to dangerous misinterpretations. We responded according to our threat assessment protocols. Which brings me to a question, continued Ziktar. Our analysts believe humans lack a fundamental concept of proportional response. Is this accurate? For the first time, Captain Chen laughed. A sound that the translator struggled to convey properly. That's not quite right. We understand proportionality perfectly well. We just define it differently than you do. Explain, requested Ziktar. In our history, Chen said, her expression growing serious, we've learned that limited responses to existential threats often lead to prolonged conflict and greater overall suffering. When faced with a force that threatens our existence, we believe the proportional response is the one that eliminates that threat completely, as quickly as possible. Even if it means, J-Care began, even if it means going beyond what might seem necessary in the moment. Chen finished. We call it decisive action, not overkill. It's not that we don't have the concept. We simply believe that when survival is at stake, half measures are more dangerous than complete ones. Ziktar considered this, and the Void Plague represents an existential threat to all life in the galaxy, Chen stated firmly. The proportional response is whatever ensures its complete elimination, regardless of temporary collateral effects. We believe our Nova Lance represents the minimum force required to achieve that goal. The chamber fell silent again as the representatives processed this distinctly human logic. It was alien to their thinking, yet contained an undeniable internal consistency. We will meet your delegation at the coordinates you provide, Ziktar decided, and we will bring our historical records of previous encounters with the phenomenon. Chen nodded. Thank you, High Counselor. One more thing. We've prepared a formal request to end the quarantine around human space and establish diplomatic relations with the Assembly. I hope recent events will be considered when evaluating our application. Indeed they will, replied Ziktar, limbs moving in a pattern of cautious optimism. Safe journeys, Captain Chen. As the transmission ended, Ziktar turned to the assembled representatives. It seems we have misunderstood our neighbors. Perhaps their approach to threats isn't a sign of primitiveness, but rather a different evolutionary adaptation. One that might save us all, added the archivist softly. 3 weeks later, the human vessel Prometheus hovered at the edge of the expanding void, its hull gleaming against the backdrop of stars not yet consumed by the encroaching darkness. Beside it, the Assembly science vessel Eternal Curiosity maintained position, its organic form pulsing with bioluminescent sensor arrays. On the Prometheus bridge, Captain Chen stood beside High Counselor Ziktar, both watching the main viewport where the Void Plague expanded visibly. Minute by minute, devouring light itself. The Nova Lance is in position, reported Chen's first officer. Final arming sequence initiated. Ziktar's patterns flashed with concern. My scientists still believe the space-time rupture could extend beyond your projected containment zone. Chen nodded. It might, but we've evacuated all systems within the potential affected region. And if we don't act now— I understand, replied Ziktar. The Assembly has unanimously authorized this action. Chen raised an eyebrow. Unanimously, even the pacifist conclave. Even they recognize that sometimes survival requires difficult choices. Ziktar's limbs moved in a gesture of resolve. They also agreed to your terms regarding humanity's admission to the Assembly. The quarantine will be lifted regardless of the outcome today. Thank you, Chen said simply. Then, turning to her crew, commence final countdown. The bridge fell silent as the weapon system powered up, drawing energy from 3 portable quantum singularities housed in the ship's engineering section, technology that had made several assembly scientists faint when they first examined it. Nova Lance at full charge, announced the weapons officer. Target locked on Void Entity Center Mass. Firing in 3, 2, 1. From the Prometheus, a beam of blinding white energy erupted, so intense that even the viewport's filters couldn't fully dim its radiance. The beam struck the blackness of the void plague. And for a moment, nothing happened. Then, reality itself seemed to shudder. The darkness contracted suddenly, as if wounded, before exploding outward in ripples of distorted spacetime. Where the beam had struck, a new star blazed into existence, then another and another, as if the weapon had ignited the very fabric of space. Containment fields holding, reported the science officer, her voice tight with concentration. The reaction is proceeding as modeled. Ziktar watched in awe as the darkness retreated, seemingly burned away by the cascading stellar reactions. It's working. Yes, Chen said quietly. But at what cost? On the tactical display, dozens of uninhabited star systems within the containment zone were being altered, some destroyed entirely by the spacetime distortions emanating from the Nova Lance impact point. A high price, acknowledged Ziktar. But as you humans say, sometimes the proportional response to an existential threat is whatever ensures survival. Chen glanced at the alien diplomat, surprised to hear human philosophy from a non-human source. You're learning our ways quickly. And perhaps you can learn from us as well, replied Ziktar. There are times when restraint and proportion serve better than overwhelming force. A balance, then, Chen suggested, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Ziktar extended a limb to meet it. A balance, between decisiveness and restraint, between overkill and inaction. On the viewport, the last tendrils of darkness dissipated, leaving behind a transformed region of space, wounded, altered, but free of the consuming void. And in the light of newly born stars, a human ship and an alien vessel remained side by side, each having learned something vital from the other. The galaxy would never be the same, but perhaps, Ziktar reflected as the human crew celebrated their victory, that wasn't such a terrifying prospect after all.